internal rate of return, is a metric that can help you evaluate the performance of your investments over time. And this is how we could compare the possibility that one investment is going to generate it one way, another investment's going to generate it another way. The timing of your cash flows can greatly affect your IRR, as cash flows received earlier have a higher impact on IRR than those received later. I mean, you saw it there, how the faster we could get that money back, how it was almost like exponential the way that it affected your IRR. Welcome back to Real Estate Crash Course. You are listening to episode number 5, which is the third in a 3-part series that we are wrapping up here called The Metrics That Matter. I am your host, Morgan Cole, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Kristen Lopez.
Hello, Morgan. How are you today?
I'm pretty good, Kristen. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm in the office in person. We're recording content in this wonderful studio, so it's a great day.
It is a great day. I am so glad you're here. I'm glad to have a friend in the studio so that I'm not here by myself, because I'm always here alone. I've got all this room inside of this studio, and you and or Ben are somewhere else. So it's nice to not be lonely.
Yes, absolutely. I think that it is fantastic to be here.
Yeah, super fun, super fun. I do feel like, though, for you or Ben at home, it would be more authentic if we had a random child just walk through the studio or something.
Oh, absolutely. Or just be in the background where we are talking, but then get distracted and have to look off into the distance to try to figure out what they need. Absolutely, that would make it feel more like home. But it's a nice break to be in the office.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad you're enjoying working at home is awesome.
Yes.
Also, having a place to go is awesome.
Is also awesome.
Yes.
Absolutely. So, question to kick us off, Morgan.
You go. Go ahead.
Not related to real estate crash course of what we're doing, but more of a personal type question. You know, when the pandemic hit and over the last couple of years, we as people have picked up some interesting hobbies. So I'm curious from you, Morgan, over the last couple of years, has there been a hobby or an interest that you have dove into and picked up?
First of all, I love your Bushism there of dove-in.
It's perfect.
Strategery. Yes, that's a great question. So I have very dorky interests, and while my hobby that I got into was ham radio. Do you know what ham radio is?
I do not know what that is.
So ham radio is it's really called amateur radio, which the difference is, like, I'm not trying to run a broadcast radio station as an amateur. It's just that's the difference is if you're a pro, you're doing it for work, like you're running a radio station, or I think back in the day it had to do with something like ships. Like if you were on a ship, then maybe you were a pro. I don't know. That's not a part of it. I really know. But I have an amateur radio license. I'm licensed as AI5CT. So you have to have a call sign. They give it to you.
You don't get to pick it?
You can request a vanity one, but they're really specific in like the prefix and the suffix and the 5.
Like a license plate.
It is. Yeah, so it's not, I mean, most of them are not available.
Gotcha.
So it's funny, like mine's, as I said, I'm AI5CT. I was at a Cub Scout campout over this past weekend, and I have a friend, a dad there. His name is CT. So, like, my call sign would be awesome for him, but AI5MC is not available.
Gotcha.
So I cannot become AI5MC.
Okay. And so in this, what are you broadcasting out?
Well, so point of fact, if I can, we're transmitting, not broadcasting.
Oh, sorry. Transmitting. Thank you.
So, yeah, you and I are kind of broadcasting if this was live right now, in a way. But when you do ham radio, you're transmitting because it's more like one-to-one.
Sure.
And someone's going to talk back to you.
Okay.
So it's like a hobby of hobbies. And so I like electronics and I like building things.
Gotcha.
So I get to build antennas and see how well they work. And it's not like I have a 100-foot tower.
Sure.
Like you build them out of like wire and you build a little transformer and it resonates at a certain frequency. But I mean, I've reached as far as Japan from Texas.
Wow.
When we were at the Cub Scout camp out, we were at a state park and we did a thing called Parks on the Air. Mm-hmm. That's a thing where you get radio dorks out of their basement into the real world and they set up like on a park bench and you talk to other people.
Wow.
And it's really pretty neat because you get to use like your hobby, you get to be in nature, you get to like have a portable station that's much more minimalistic than what you might have amassed in your garage or whatever. But we made contact with people off the top of my head in Ohio, Indiana, and Washington State from Texas.
Wow.
And these kids, these 8-year-olds were just like, their minds were blown that this was, it's not a cell phone. Like they could see that this was a thing, a box that was hooked up to an antenna and it had like a handheld, walkie-talkie deal. But they were able to talk to the other side of the United States. And so it's kind of magical.
That is really cool.
Yeah.
I have never heard of that before.
Well, now you know. So what about you? What about you? What's your most nearest and dearest hobby that you've adopted in the last couple of years?
I think that I would also consider mine a little bit dorky, but that is reading fiction books. I, for the longest time, would read books like on a slower pace of like, I wouldn't call them self-development books and really like leadership books and things like that. But over the pandemic and after, my brain got a little bit burnt out from those. So I started picking up stories.
Okay.
And I've been cranking through stories.
That's cool. So what fiction, like what area or
I like
whatever?
Historical fiction.
Historical fiction.
Yes. So things that are based around time periods, but not necessarily the real stories of what happened during those time periods.
So like Back to the Future Part 3.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yes. But then put into a book. And so that is my like personal favorite genre to read. So I have been diving in. My personal achievement, if I may brag for a moment, is that last month I read 14 books.
What?
Yeah.
So my mother, I don't know how much she reads. I don't know if she reads 14 books in a month, but I know that my mother-in-law also is a voracious reader.
Yes, it was. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. I would just kind of started going, and I don't know, last month was full of a lot of great books that, I don't know, just really kept my interest going. The nerdiest one that I read it's called The Dictionary of Lost Words, and it was about back in 1800s, whenever they were actually putting the dictionary together in England, and the people that were defining words and how words would come in, and people would have to authenticate the words and figure out have they been used in literature in the past, and how that led into more words that were spoken by upper class people. And then the lower class people that couldn't read, that couldn't write down words, they had a whole different vernacular of words that they were using. So this book is kind of like going back and forth between the legit dictionary that is being written, and it's the perspective of a girl whose dad's working on the dictionary, who's then kind of going out into life and realizing that women and people who are like just merchants have a totally different language and words that are not allowed to be in the dictionary because they weren't written down. And so the words that we have were because they were written down and they were authenticated, and there was this process that was put into place of how a word would be allowed to go into the dictionary.
That's amazing. I've never even thought about that.
So historical fiction, and it's based on true facts of like how the dictionary is being made, but it's told from a perspective of somebody that didn't actually exist. But the people that were around this character did exist and are the people that actually did put the dictionary together.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it could even be fascinating, like the concept of like making a story about how they put the dictionary together.
Exactly. Yes. And so those are the types of things that I like, where I'm still learning something, but it's told through a perspective of a story. And so that is that's what I nerd out on is like,
That's pretty cool.
I like history.
I would love. What is the book? So what was that book called?
It's called The Dictionary of Lost Words.
Dictionary of Lost Words. You said that. Dictionary of Lost Words.
Yes.
Okay. You'll have to send me a Kindle link or something
Yeah.
on that.
It's-
Kindle, is that how you read these things?
No,
Or you're buying 14
yeah.
books in a month and reading them.
Yeah, my husband does not like that.
Wow.
I get a shipment of books, but then I have just if I may continue this really.
Yeah,
but
go for it.
I have my favorite bookstore is actually one that is in Bastrop, and
Okay.
it's owned by one of my favorite authors. His name is Ryan Holiday, and Ryan Holiday, he has written this multiple part series like Courage is Calling, Discipline is the Destiny, and all of these books that are rooted in philosophy and philosophers, and he tells like how to be he has stoicism and all of these different books. He's my favorite author.
Okay.
And he owns a bookstore in Bastrop.
Cool.
And he opened this bookstore in the middle of the pandemic. Anyway, so my husband takes me there for like those are my gifts usually. It's like, oh, we get to go to the bookstore, and I'm like, let's go. And so that we go there, and I get a haul of books, and then I bring them back home, and then I read through the books.
This
and
is
then I get to get
fascinating.
new books once I finish my books.
I'm learning every day here.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic. But
Learning
now
every day.
I have to go to half price books now
Well, that's what I was wondering is
because my book budget
Yeah.
was very expensive.
books can add up.
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'll think of a few books that I want, and you're blasting past $100 like before you know it.
Oh, absolutely. And so
yeah.
that's what we reviewed the budget, and my husband was like, Kristen, we've got to go to half price books.
While we end this subject, I want to point out to you that you're the first person I've ever talked to who had a book budget. So,
Yes.
I mean, other than a college student who knew they had to buy them, but
yeah.
you have a household.
I have a
book
line
budget.
item in the budget for books and an Audible subscription.
I've been told I had too many expense categories on a P&L before, and I've never had a book category.
Well,
so
so you're actually doing really well.
I must be. I must be.
So moving us now, as we're talking about finances, great segue here into what we're talking about today, which is our internal rate of return, which is
Yes.
wrapping up our 3-part series. Part 1 was cap rate.
Yep.
Part 2 was cash on cash.
Yep.
And now we're diving into our internal rate of return, or IRR for short.
That's right. That's right. And IRR is essentially IRR, internal rate of return, is a metric that can help you evaluate the performance of your investments over time.
Okay.
That's the fundamental difference in IRR and the other two metrics. Cap rate there's no time. I mean, it's the first year snapshot.
Sure.
There's time, but it's just a period of 1 year. Cash on cash changes over time, but it's still limited to 1 year at a time.
Sure.
Or whatever time period you're evaluating. Internal rate of return, however, takes into consideration what is referred to as the time value of money. Mm-hmm. Theoretically, money is worth more today than it is tomorrow. So we need to measure how much we are going to receive over a period of time, and the timing of those cash flows, when money is leaving our account, when money is returning to our bank account, and the amount of time that it took to accomplish that is what turns into the internal rate of return.
Okay. So I see. IRR is giving us a broader perspective on performance of our real estate investment over time. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I have I mean I have some notes here because IRR is so complicated that I don't want to overlook a few things, and I think it's really important to point out that it takes into consideration. I'm reminding myself here that it takes into consideration things that cash on cash does not, which would be appreciation and amortization.
Okay.
So cash on cash takes into consideration. I mean, we're assuming you may have a loan on the property at that point. So it is how much money you put in, your cash in, and then how much money you get out. So cash on cash. But it doesn't take into consideration the repayment, like the loan going down, or how much money you walk away with when you sell it. Internal rate of return brings that part back in, and it says, okay, we know how much money left your bank account, but now we're also measuring how much money is coming back at the end of this investment.
Okay. So how would we go about calculating the internal rate of return?
So, earlier, cap rate, cash on cash. I mean, I can pretty much do if it's normal numbers in my head, and most people can. IRR is definitely a bit more complex than the other metrics that we've discussed. So I have to give you a textbook style definition
Okay.
to accurately explain it or tell you how to calculate it. The basic idea is to find the discount rate at which the net present value of all cash flows from an investment is equal to zero. In other words, IRR is the rate at which the present value of all future cash flows equals the initial investment. I would. It's funny.
That
because,
is definitely more complicated.
yeah. Okay, so here's the thing. I've never read someone a definition or told them a definition of IRR, and they're like, "Yep, got it.
Yeah.
Totally understand." I could probably put that into my own words without using net present value because I would rather explain the concept than like how you arrive at the IRR.
Sure.
But again, I mean, we would be remiss if we didn't include the definition. But let's just say that internal rate of return, when you calculate it, fundamentally you're keeping track of. We already said this, but now that I'm revisiting it, I just want to be clear that if I was to buy a property, there's money leaving my account.
Yes.
And then I get annual cash flow. That's money coming back into my account.
Mm-hmm.
And how much time is between when the money left my account and the money hits my account will affect the IRR.
Okay.
And then at the end, because the property is going to be worth more than I paid for it, I get some appreciation.
Mm-hmm.
And because my loan balance is going to be less than when I started, I get some amortization. So if I invested $50,000 and I sell it and I walk away with $250,000, this takes all of that into consideration. I don't feel like for real estate you necessarily need to become a mathematician that can calculate this in your head, though. I just want to be. I wish that I could do a better job of explaining the definition of IRR off the top of my head, but I can explain the concept better,
Sure.
really, than just the definition.
Absolutely. And so some of those factors, just to recap there, that go into calculating our IRR, the biggest thing that I've heard you say is the amount of time. So if it's coming back faster, we have a higher IRR. And if it's taking longer for it to return, is it our initial investment or like the total cost of the house?
I mean, they're all different variables
Okay.
because this is what brings it all. Like it takes the functions of the cap rate being the purchase price of the property, the functions of the cash on cash being your cash investment and the cash flow that came back, and then the sale or the disposition of the property. But yes, if all things were the same, if you were going to make the exact same amount of money in cash flows, but you were going to have it faster, yes,
Okay.
you would have a greater IRR.
Okay. And so since you said this is not typically something that the everyday person can just calculate in their head, are there special tools or even like a software that we would need to calculate an IRR?
Yes. So it's funny to go back to our book thing. I was sitting there thinking, I don't know of a better occupation for an author than owning a bookstore.
Yeah.
I have also found that for me, a great occupation for a person who likes investing in real estate is owning a software company,
Yep.
Discover. So, yeah, it is common. And I mean, I could do on the back of a napkin, I could do what's called a T-bar with a regular calculator. I could calculate IRR.
That
I've
sounds
done
like
it.
going back to real estate class.
Yeah, it is. You only learn that in real estate
Yes.
class. And
As soon as you said the T bar, I was
Yeah.
like, I got PTSD flashback. No.
well, the other hilarious thing is it goes back to you're not always going to have a calculator in your pocket.
Oh, absolutely.
And guess what? I do. So, so let's just say that nobody is out there doing it manually on the back of a napkin. So yeah, it is much more common to use a financial calculator or software like Discover or Excel to calculate IRR.
Sure.
Any of these financial calculator or other softwares are going to have functions that are built in, which will calculate IRR for you.
Okay. So that is very good to know that there's somewhere that we can go, the everyday
Yes.
person can go to figure out what an IRR would look like. Could you, Morgan, walk us through an example of how to calculate the IRR using some hypothetical numbers?
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to put a series of cash flows into Excel here. And for those of you listening and not watching on YouTube, if you're able, this would be a good place to start watching.
You should definitely start watching.
Yeah. So I already have this teed up here, but you know what? I'm going to clear it because I want to do this in real time.
Okay.
So let's say that we invest $100,000, and I made that negative because that money is leaving my bank account.
Okay, so we're saying that we're buying a property and we are out of our pocket putting $100,000.
Yep.
That is not the value of the property.
Correct.
That's how much money we are taking out of our pocket and putting into the property.
For whatever reason, it's cash purchase, it's the down payment, whatever it is, but that's what we got. And over the next 5 years, the property is going to generate annual cash flows, which are going to increase. And I have a question for you, Kristen. If we invested $100,000 in a property and it spun off $10,000, what would be the cash on cash return? Putting you on the spot here.
If you're watching on YouTube, you just saw panic come into my face. I'm going to take a guess, and if I'm wrong, we'll edit it out. 10%?
You got it.
Oh, thank goodness.
You got it. You got it. Now, we talked last time that cash on cash will almost always change every year.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to do a rental increase.
Okay.
And the next year we're going to get $12,000.
You go up to 12%?
12%. What is 12%?
I'm killing it.
So then we're going to move through this. We're going to go 14,000, we're going to go 16,000, and we're going to go $18,000. Now, when we sell this property, it's going to be worth more money.
Sure.
So when we and this is showing each year here, by the way. So what we have here is a table, and it has a 0 saying in time period 0, which is before the investment went through its first year, 100,000 left our bank account. And then in years 1 through 5, 10, 12, 14, 16, and $18,000 hit our bank account. And then at the very end of year 5, we received an additional, we sold the property and walked away with $150,000.
Perfect. And again, that's not the sale price. That's what the check in our hand that we're walking away with.
Walking away from the title company. So we click internal rate of return here on this calculator, and it's giving me a 20% internal rate of return. Now, I want to go one step further, and I want to illustrate a point.
Okay.
So in this case here, we have 10 plus 12, 14, 16, 18. That's $70,000 coming into our bank account over the course of 5 years. Plus, we have 150, so our total gain on this is 70 plus 50 is 120.
Okay.
And it took us 5 years to do it.
All right.
Okay, and we got a 20% IRR. I'm going to take off $18,000.
Okay.
And I'm going to earn the same $150,000, but 1 year earlier. But I'm going to not make another year of cash flow.
Okay.
So now we're at $102,000 of total gain,
but
we got it in 4 years.
Okay.
As opposed to $120,000 of total gain in 5 years.
Okay.
You follow me on that,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes.
Okay. Watch this. You see the IRR is 20%? IRR is now 21.62. We made less money. We got less dollars, but we got the dollars faster.
Okay.
And so our internal rate of return is now higher.
That makes a lot of sense. So IRR is it fair to say that it is truly measuring the rate that will get our money back? So it's like it's the faster we get it back, the higher that our IRR is going to be.
I mean, yes, pretty much exactly. If we were to take away the cash flows and just invest $100,000 and then just say at the end of year 3, I'm going to get $110,000. I mean, we're not even doing anything other than getting a little bit more money back. That's a 3.23% IRR.
Okay.
If I was able to get that at the end of 1 year, then that would be a 10% IRR, which that makes total sense. We can do that math in our head.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we got $10,000 at the end of 1 year. And I'm thinking that if we did it in the second year, it might be 5. I don't know how linear it is with these kind of numbers. 4.88. It's not. See, it's not the linearity. It's not just you divide it in 2. There's interesting things that go on here. So, and then you can see if we go all the way to the end of year 10, $110,000 and click IRR, it's a 0.96% internal rate of return. Okay. I'm not saying I don't want to invest $100,000 and get $110,000 back, but if you give me one option where I can do it in 10 years and another option where I can do it in 5 years,
I would probably want to do it in 5 years.
I'd probably want to do it in 5 years.
Yeah.
And this is how we could compare the possibility that one investment is going to generate it one way, another investment's going to generate it another way.
Okay. So then This is interesting, right? So we're real time seeing the IRR change up or down. Time is a big factor. What are some of the other factors that go into determining the IRR? What can affect that?
So there's several factors that can affect it. Again, I'm going to consult my definition here. So cash flow timing is the one that we just messed with right there. We could see, and that's how we shortened and extended it up there.
So then, for example, if we were negative cash flow in the first year, that's going to bring our IRR down.
That's going to bring our IRR down. Yeah, let's go back to the example that we were working on in the previous episode where we invested $50,000 and we had negative $5,000 of cash flow. And you said, well, Morgan, why would anybody ever do that? And I said to you, well, because I might be thinking about appreciation in the future. So let's say it's negative 5,000, negative 1,000, and then we make 2,000, 5,000, 8,000, and then we walk away with $150,000. So we put $50K in, but we believed this was going to super appreciate.
If I had to guess, I think we're going to get a pretty positive IRR.
I'm thinking this is going to be way more than 20%. 25.
Wow. Okay.
So that right there, I mean, here's the thing. If you look at this, if you really knew the future, which nobody knows the future, but if I said to you, hey, Kristen, you have to invest $50,000 into this property, and you're like, well, how much money is it going to make? And I'm like, well, it's going to make 1,000 and then 5,000 and then 10,000. You're like, yeah, that sounds good. If I said you had to invest $56,000 into that property and it wasn't your last $50,000 on planet Earth, you'd also be like, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah. So what's 6,000 more?
What's 6,000 more? So in this case here, not to say 6,000 is nothing, you just invested 6,000 more, but it was spread out over the first year or two.
Right.
That's really what you did. You invested a little bit more money. Now, this was a 25% IRR. We are happy campers.
Sure.
Okay, $56,000 left our bank account, and we got a 25% IRR. Now, let's say, though, that what really happened was we put $56,000 in, and we got 0, 0, 258, and 150. It's a little bitty bit less.
Wow.
Because we put in the $6,000
at the
earlier.
Beginning. Gotcha.
So we did not have, that money was gone for longer. Again, time value of money. This is a nuance. That was just a nuanced difference, but essentially, but anyway, that's what happened there. So the other things that you said, what factors can affect it. So that was my example of that the cash flow, the timing of the cash flow can greatly affect it. Other things that can affect it are property appreciation. So let's go back to that. Negative 5,000, negative 1,000. What did I do? 2,000, 5,000, and then I said 150,000, right?
Yep.
And that was our IRR of 20. Okay, now we're at 27. I skipped a number differently. What if the property only appreciated to the point that we walked away with $85,000?
That's definitely going to bring it down.
10.73. What if we hit a home run because the world was crazy the last couple of years and we were able to walk away with $350,000 of appreciation?
Oh, I'm so excited to see what it is.
Yeah,
Woo!
56% IRR.
That's awesome.
This would be like taking $56,000 to the bank right now. And a year later, you give them $5,000 more. And a year later, you give them $1,000 more. And then another year goes by, they give you $2,000. Another year goes by, they give you $5,000. You walk away with $350. In the bank, it's like if they were advertising on billboards, here is a 56.57% certificate of deposit.
Yeah. Well, that would be nice.
That would be insane, right? But that's what this is telling you, is that's the same kind of thing that they're saying. If you dropped off this money for the life of the deal, this is the annual yield you're going to get.
Okay.
This is the annualized yield that your investment is going to get.
That makes so much sense. That makes so much sense.
And I might have used a small amount of slang there, but it just drives the point home that it's annualized.
Absolutely.
That's really what we got going on here. We're not so concerned about the negative 10% or the negative 1% or the positive 2.5% or whatever. We're saying now the entire investment, that's what we have going on there. And so the thing that you need to just take away from this right here is that the timing of your cash flows can greatly affect your IRR, as cash flows received earlier have a higher impact on IRR than those received later. I mean, you saw it there,
Right.
how the faster we could get that money back, how it was almost like exponential the way that it affected your IRR.
Yeah, absolutely. That, wow, makes so much sense. So now that we know how to calculate our IRR, what factors impact it, we've been talking a lot over the last couple of episodes about really finding the metrics that matter the most to you as an investor. So, can you walk me through a couple of maybe like use cases where IRR would be very important for us to look at the beginning of us purchasing a property?
Yeah. If you know that you're going to be selling a property, if you have a time horizon in mind, IRR would be very applicable. You could use it to identify and measure up the performance of multiple investment opportunities. We just ran through it right here. We did 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah.
And if I know that I have $56,000 to deploy and that I am wanting to hold this for 5 years, I mean, all we can do is make the best decision we can make today with the information we have available today. This is not going to come true down to the next penny here.
Sure.
But if we analyzed all of the houses or all of the properties with the same set of criteria, with the same set of assumptions, if they're all in the same market or what have you, we could then make the best decision we can make today. Now, and easily you would just say, well, what's the which one has the highest internal rate of return? That's the one that I want to do. There'd be some things that you'd want to do to maybe mitigate risk, though,
Sure.
where you would say, okay, this one has the highest internal rate of return, but it only has a 3% cap rate. This other one has a slightly lower IRR, but it has a higher cap rate. Lower cap rate means we're paying more for the property relative to the NOI, which means that we could be upside down on the property. We might be overpaying if we bought a property that only had a 3% cap rate. So there's a little bit of a series of checks and balances here that we can't just say, I'm only using IRR, but if you knew that, hey, I want to buy something today, I want to hold it for 5 years, and I want to sell it, you could set up the IRR, and then you could run through the other stuff, and you could say, is this going to cost me $10,000 a year? Can I afford that? Are we overpaying because that's a 3% cap rate, or is it an 8% cap rate? Is 8% even overpaying? So on and so forth. Those would be ways that we could not only use IRR to measure the maximum, but also roll in those other couple of factors to be sure that we weren't just focused on one and not including the other ones.
That's very interesting. So as you're talking about this and knowing our ideal hold period, I'm curious from your experience with being an investor and working with investors, is that something that people are thinking about on the front end? Maybe you could throw a story in here of like a real life example here of somebody really making a decision. I know IRR is not the only metric we should be looking at, but really figuring out your ideal hold period, is that important on the front end to be making decisions like this?
Yeah. So yes, I mean, yes, I don't mean to hesitate there. Yes, I don't. Many things in real estate are fluid.
Sure.
I mean, we know year to year, rental rates go up, rental rates go flat, rental rates might even go down. Prices do the same thing. You may have a loan for 5 year with a fixed rate for 5 years that then resets after 5 years. If you know all of if you take all the things that are known about your property, then yeah, I would say I've seen plenty of people who have said, listen, I know that my loan product has got a fixed rate for 30 years. I know that I can afford to support this property if it ran into negative cash flow. So let's go ahead and figure out how to make the most amount of money.
Sure.
Those people that I've worked with have said, hey, let's get the right cap rate. I used 8 earlier. Let's stick with 8. They've said, I'm also interested in getting some cash flow. So I'd like at least an 8 or 10% cash on cash return. That checks that box as well. And then they're like, hey, given like moderate appreciation and assuming we have our amortization of the loan that we're expecting, can I get at least a 15 or 16% IRR? And it's kind of like check. Let's buy that property. And the people that I've worked with who've bought properties in that manner, have been very successful with the properties. Sure. I've met people who wanted something like a 25% IRR, and with that, generally speaking, higher return comes with more risk.
Yeah.
It could be a development deal where, yes, if everything works out great, then you're going to make a ton of money. I mean, I had a friend that did a real estate deal where, they came to me to talk about the numbers, and really at the end of the day, what happened is I said to him, I said, listen, I love everything about this investment except it scares me to death.
Mhm.
And it was an investment where if oil had suffered, the property would suffer. If oil prices went down, if the oil market suffered, if the oil market failed, the property would fail. There was no other reason for this property to succeed other than depending on the oil industry.
Sure.
So in this case, you could look at the numbers and it was like cap rate, yep, cash on cash, yep, IRR, yep. But the reason it has a high cash on cash, the reason it has a high IRR is because the associated
oil.
risks.
Mhm.
And so in that situation, they did have a period of time where oil went negative. I don't know if you remember this, but oil was there was a negative pricing on oil for a period of time a couple of years ago, and that really affected the profitability of that property. And it's not to say that anybody made a mistake, because they approached it with the perspective that, hey, this is tied to the oil industry.
Sure.
But the reason that the property had such high percentage returns on all of those metrics was because of the chance that the property could suffer. So it's like, you better get your money back quick, so that at the point that it does suffer, you don't have as much in it, kind of, in a way.
Absolutely. That's very interesting, especially how you tied all three of the past episodes that we've done, the two past episodes and this one together, to really make a sound decision whenever approaching an investment property. And I think that was really what we were wanting to get at here with this series. Is it's not just one metric that we need to look at, but instead looking at the investment as a whole. So kind of thinking about that and tying those three together, could you maybe give us another example of how bringing all three of these metrics together can help to make a good investment decision?
Yeah. So without really getting into like another specific property example, I would say, let's just talk about them each one by one as we wrap up this series.
Yeah.
So cap rate was the first part of the series. And what we learned about cap rate is that it has to do with property value.
Sure.
So if you have a property that has $50,000 of net operating income, and you are actively participating in your real estate market, and that I'll have my calculator here in front of me so that I can do this.
Because now you have a calculator in your pocket.
I have a calculator in my pocket.
All the teachers that told us that we wouldn't have one, we have one now.
Not only do I have a calculator, I have a HP 10B2 financial calculator in my pocket all the time, because this is the one that I use as my default calculator. So I can do IRR on my on my phone. So let's just say that we've got a $50,000 NOI. Let's go through the checks and balances here real quick. And we know, because we're actively participating in the market, that this property is going to go for a 7% cap rate.
Okay.
So we take NOI and we divide it by the market cap rate to determine value. Divided by 7% equals $714,000 value.
Okay.
All right. So step one is, we know the property's worth $714,000.
Okay.
It's offered for $700,000. We are willing to buy this thing at this point. We right? Like, we're happy. Okay. Step two then is to say, am I comfortable with the cash on cash? All right. I'm comfortable with the purchase price. I am ready to buy this $714,000 property. So if I'm comfortable with the purchase price, now I need to figure out what my cash on cash is going to be. So I'm going to take $714,000. I'm going to multiply it by 0.7, because I'm going to get a 70% loan to value ratio on this property. I got approximately $500,000. That's my present value. I'm going to get a 30-year amortization. And today I'm going to get about a 6.25% interest rate. And my payment's going to be $3,000 times 12 is, in this case, it's $36,700, which, if I take that away from my $50,000, I have $13,263 of cash flow. the property was 714, the loan was 500. It's going to cost us like 20,000 in closing costs. So let's say we take the 715, add 20 is 735, take the 500 away, you have $235,000 invested. So I'm going to take 13,263 and divide it by $235,000.
Because 235 was our money out of pocket.
So now I'm doing cash on cash. So
Yep.
I got 235 left my bank account,
Correct.
but I'm going to get 13,000 back in the first
So
year.
we're dividing those.
Yep, and now I have a 5.6% cash on cash.
Okay.
I'm still not angry.
No.
So we had a 7.5%, 7% cap rate. We said property would be worth 714, but we
Yep.
can buy it for 700.
And now we've got a 5.6% cash
Yep.
on cash so far.
So
you've
now-
got checks from me.
There you go. There you go. So let's say I've put my $235,000 in. I'm going to reset this thing real
Okay.
quick so I can be sure.
So we've moved back over
We're back
to
into Excel.
our Excel.
Sorry, if we lost anybody who only briefly joined us on YouTube, come back, please. So we've put $235 into this thing, and then we got a loan, and in the first year we got $13,000. So let's just say that what we bought there was let's say what we bought was a 30-space mobile home or RV park,
Okay.
and we're gonna do a $25 rental increase each year.
Okay.
So 30 times 25 times 12 means we get a $9,000 bump every year in
Okay.
our income. So
now we're at
so we get 22,000, and then we're going to get
31.
31,000, and then 40,000, and then 49,000.
well,
And
not angry at that.
I don't really feel like calculating the disposition price there, but we're just going to assume that we're selling it for
1.5.
1.5. I mean, we could do it though because that would be easier. So what do we went
Bought
up?
it for
We had 13, so we got 49,000 minus 13,000 plus $50,000 was the original NOI divided by 0.075. I'm going to throw a trick at you here. I'm using a half point higher reversionary cap rate.
okay.
Do you have any idea what I said or why I said it?
No.
Okay. We are not going to assume that the property is becoming more valuable because cap rates are going down.
Okay.
In fact, we're going to assume that when we sell it, cap rates are going to be higher, which
Okay.
means it's worth less if I don't make the property worth more by
Okay.
generating more NOI.
Okay.
So I chose 7.5 as my going out cap rate.
Gotcha.
And I took my $50,000 and I increased it by this $36,000, which gave
Okay.
me $86,000 of new NOI.
Okay.
I capitalized that at 7.5%, which made it worth $1.14 million. We originally got a $500,000 loan. At the end of 5 years, it'd probably be like $465,000 because. So let's just take that. Let's take the 1.146 and multiply it by 0.92 because we're going to pay 8% on closing costs. We have $1,054,000. Then we're going to take away like $465,000
For our remaining
for our
loan
loan
balance.
So now we're walking away with 589.9. Let's just call it 590. Let's check our IRR. 28.5. Bing, bing, bing.
Well, I'm-
all the way across, we would buy this property.
I'm buying the property.
Yeah. So we just checked cap rate. Love it. Cash on cash. I mean, I've seen better than 5.8, but
It's not terrible.
it's not terrible. 28% IRR. You have every person's attention that you could possibly get in front of.
Absolutely.
So right there is how you could. I know that we already have scheduled our episode, which would be putting it all together, and that would be we would go way more in depth. But
Yep.
it was how does this work in conjunction with the other ones, and that right there was the answer.
That was fantastic to run through all of that. So, final question for you, Morgan. I like to ask your opinion on things because it's 2023. We are in, what is it, April of 2023.
Yep.
Is there one metric in particular that you would keep your eye on as far as purchasing investment properties?
Wow. We talked about a little bit in the middle of the cash on cash episode, what would I be looking for? And I gave you my answer that I would be looking for cash flow
Okay.
because I'm concerned that prices already ran up. And I want to be sure that if prices come down a little bit, I didn't overpay by by accepting too low of a cap rate, and also that I'm just generally speaking, whatever combination of loan, purchase price, rental rate, that we have positive cash flow.
Okay.
What would I keep my eye on right now? Your question was if I could choose a metric. If I could choose a metric right now, cap rate.
Cap rate?
Because again, I'm concerned about purchase prices.
Okay.
It would be my sniff test. It wouldn't be that I would accept, probably, well, you kind of have to accept flat to negative cash flow right now, but I would still be looking for a measurable IRR, something that was going to make me happy. I would be accepting of a pretty much flat cash on cash. Well, no, now I'm contradicting myself. I'm kind of playing two hats here because now I'm thinking about mobile home parks and the fact that we would be buying it, owning it for a little while, and selling it. So because I know that, I kind of want to recant a little bit of my statement and say I'm still going to demand on a new purchase that there's some cash flow.
Okay.
I'm almost saying it needs to be all three. It needs to be, we can't overpay because we can't go buying things at 3 and 4% cap rates, because if we were forced to sell it and cap rates rose to 6%, we're going to lose our shirt.
Sure.
Okay. The cash flow is the only way we're going to stay healthy with a high interest rate loan. We've got to be sure that we have some cash flow that can pay for our loan that's going to be at a higher interest rate than we would like to have. And then the willingness to do the investment is probably going to be contingent upon what's in it over the life cycle of the entire investment, which the IRR can measure. So I think in this market right here, I would lean on all three of them for different reasons.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to touch on the original comment that I made in the last one regarding cash on cash, I still think that that's one where you've got to be real careful that the only way you can weather a market that has a little bit of vacancy that maybe you weren't expecting, or if you had to lower your rate to attract somebody, is you had to have enough cash flow to start with that you could give a little bit of it up and still stay alive.
Yeah.
Does that help? Did that accurate? Do you feel like that was a good?
100%.
Okay.
Morgan. Yes.
Okay.
No,
I feel like I wandered there.
No. I appreciate you walking through, because you are an expert and you have been doing this for a while. And so hearing your candid thoughts on, how you're thinking about real estate today in 2023, I think is very insightful for all of us to be able to just understand kind of the way that you're thinking about it, which then helps to, put it into context around what's really happening in the market today. Because we can talk about the metrics all day and understand what they are, but you giving that context of how you're thinking about them, I think is very clarifying in really applying these metrics into everyday real estate and investments.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And yeah, I've had I've been involved in real estate investing for 15 years now, and I've seen a couple of different markets, and I've been an active investor through all of them. Yeah. So I might not have the same answer that every other person would have, but I definitely have an answer that would make me happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was an amazing episode today, walking through our internal rate of return and a little taste of putting it together, where that's what we're going to be focused on in our next episode. Is we're going to do a deep dive in putting all three of these metrics together, and very excited to be able to look at some real properties and to be able to dive in to see how all three of these metrics really work together, and really putting out there how you did all of those really quick calculations in your head, how they work.
Discover can do it faster.
And being able to see how it all works together. So join us for our next episode, where that's what we're going to dive into. But thank you so much, Morgan, for all of the insights that you gave today, and especially breaking down the IRR of properties.
Yeah, absolutely, Kristen. And thanks for being here in person and being here to go through this together. So everyone, thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.